So both of you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I'll let you start whenever you're ready.
Our co-teaching course is referred to as Decision Making and Social Work. This course is based on Daniel Kanan's groundbreaking work about decision making. He's the first psychologist to win the Nobel Prize. There isn't actually a category in psychology for the Nobel Prize. He won it in economics, and therefore it's extremely impressive that he, as a psychologist, was able to win by his research, which overlapped economics and psychology. The same year, he was also awarded the Medal of Freedom from President Obama. His research revealed the power of the subconscious mind and focused on decision making, and is mostly known for his New York Times bestseller, Thinking Fast and Slow. His research revealed that people believe they're being rational most of the time, but really much of our thinking is automatic, done subconsciously and by instinct. We're actually far more irrational than we realize, and it's a good thing because it's our survival mechanism. He discovered that our brain has two operating systems referred to as System 1 and System 2. His discovery of the bandwidth of each system is what made his research so significant and won him the Nobel Prize. System 1, seen on the left side, operates automatically and quickly with little or no effort and no sense of voluntary control. It's involuntary and generates impressions, intentions, and feelings. System 1 is taking everything in that's going on the outside and processing it on the inside of the mind. The basic assessments include language, facial recognition, social hierarchy, and causal associations. Because System 1 is automatic, it can't be turned off, and biases are almost impossible to prevent. The shortcuts our System 1 makes, they're referred to as heuristics. So our mind is doing this automatic system and automatic process because it has to, or we would go into something called cognitive overload. System 2, which only happens 5% of the time, has a very limited budget of attention. You can only do so many cognitions that are difficult at once. So it's slow, and it's defining characteristics deliberate and conscious with self-awareness and logical and skeptical reasoning. It seeks new and missing information and tries to put things together. On average, we have about 35,000 decisions a day. So your automatic systems, first, number 1 seen on the left, its primary task is to protect your deliberate System 2 from overload. It's a shortcut. Okay, and get to the next slide.
The course overview and purpose. So the course will provide students with basic working knowledge of the theoretical, psychological, behavioral, and neural mechanisms that underlies decision-making, judgment, and cognitive biases, with an emphasis on systems and an introduction to computational modeling. And the course will address the strategies of probability and the influence on outcomes and the implications in the student's practice of social work. And students will also examine limitations, there's a misspelling there, but it's limitations of decision-making faculties and mental models, particularly under risk and uncertainty in the practice of social work. And students will also explore and critically examine their role as a social worker and how they make decisions across various domains, including clinical, organizational, social, and their field placements. And so the CSWE competencies, so the course will contribute to the development of the 9 competencies. So through the course, we do talk about kind of ethical and professional behavior by identifying kind of the underlying kind of cognitive biases and in our own decision making, as well as in terms of treatment planning and how to the strategies to overcome kind of using more heuristic kind of applications, and then competency 2, engaging diversity and difference in practice. Again, we go further into more of how certain kind of mental kind of representations are often at the forefront because easily due to more kind of availability and especially again in the times of when the social worker feels kind of uncertain, or there may be a sense of kind of risk or loss. And competency 3, kind of advancing human rights, social, economic, and environmental justice. So by being more attuned and self-aware to kind of our own decision-making processes and the biases and judgments that kind of influence us, we can also see kind of how our clients and communities that we serve are not only impacted, but the way that the kind of external environment may also be influencing kind of their own kind of mental models and kind of the types of heuristics that they may be using to formulate their decisions and judgments. And competency 4, engaging in practice-informed research and research-informed practice. So we bridge kind of theory, research, and practice in this course. And so integrating the psychology, neuroscience, computer science, as well as economics, and a multidisciplinary approach. And if Ariel, do you have anything to add for the other competencies? Or
In terms of evaluation, adding how this perspective and how each system influences diagnoses, macro systems, and micro systems in clinical social work.
And so this is our course outline here. So the course outline, the first session is more of a course overview and certain specific kind of terminology that we'll be using throughout the course, such as
heuristics.
And the theories of like prospect theory, as Ariel mentioned earlier, utility theory, game theory, etc. And then session 2 is the psychology of decision making and social work practice. And then session 3, we go kind of delve even more into more of the cognitive neuroscience of decision making. So the neural mechanisms underlying
cognitive dissonance and the discomfort that's experienced
in times of uncertainty, and when there's that sense of kind of risk rather than reward, and which prior knowledge and likelihood influence kind of reward probability. And that's often, research shows that when they've done an fMRI scan, that processing happens in the kind of medial prefrontal cortex. And in session 3, we go into more of the terminology of judgment, cognitive biases, and heuristics. And as Ariel mentioned earlier about heuristics, about that mental shortcut. And there's 4 types of heuristics that we often may kind of revert to, especially under pressure and again under kind of risk or uncertainty, and then and how that heuristics are also kind of an efficient kind of mental process, but how that oftentimes it can lead into kind of biases that we may not be aware of, and therefore kind of judgments. And
they can be difficult to change and influence.
Absolutely, and especially without without knowing kind of the processing that's happening and kind of where those I'd say biases and judgments come from. Because in social work, we often talk about like implicit biases, but the kind of to delve even more into kind of the psychology of it and where that actually stems from, and the research behind it is often kind of overlooked in social work practice or social work in general. And then we go into session 4, which is risk and probability, judgment and choice under uncertainty. Again, these are kind of the kind of terms that we kind of discussed in session 1. And for example, like prospect theory predicts kind of risk attitudes across various domains of gains and risk aversion, risk attitudes, domains of losses, risk seeking, and reward. And then session 5, we go into again more of that terminology that Ariel mentioned about like loss aversion, availability, and time and distance. And so that sometimes the time and kind of distances can be used as like more subconscious reference points in terms of an expected asset or a loss. they are often kind of more subjective and kind of relative to the performance or influence of our own kind of mental kind of coding of the predictive outcomes, and avoiding losses that by coding them as more of a risk or a cost rather than kind of reframing it as a gain.
And this is really original because loss aversion prospect theory was the idea behind loss aversion was really a business term invented and also used to evaluate the economy. But his book is so original because it's the first time that he was able to really adapt psychology manipulation into the economy. And you realize the economics is really a macro psychological manipulation. And with loss aversion, it's used in marketing. But if we could flip it, a logical algorithm, then you can expand your gains, but you have to understand why you're so risk averse or not.
And so and we further explore that in the second half of the course. And so in session, I think this is session, session 7 is the neural basis of mental models. So that's the decision process and hierarchical Bayesian model. So Bayesian kind of decision theory, which is also another kind of statistical kind of model that's often used in terms of probabilities and outcomes and kind of the sense of likelihood in terms of selection. And so it basically kind of sums up how the past knowledge kind of summarizes and influences our current kind of decision making process, and then and impacts kind of our estimation of the probability of the kind of different possible outcomes. And oftentimes it's skewed in a sense of risk. And again, that uncertainty that's there. And so we look at more of that, and that's kind of as we're integrating a bit more computational models into the course, starting from here, and then session 8, cognitive biases and systemic decision-making paradigms under risk. So Ariel kind of touched upon a little bit earlier about system 1 and system 2, which we'll kind of delve a little bit more later in the presentation. And then session 9 is predictive value and Bayesian inference on probability. And so again, that computational modeling that we include kind of more of how Bayesian inference is more of a two-dimensional kind of bias parameter. So it talks about how the prior and kind of the likelihood of us to kind of retrieve certain types of heuristics in our ways of making decisions or judgments as well. And so we also talk about kind of the, like cognitive functioning and cognitive control, kind of underlying kind of Bayesian inference. And then we go into it's kind of the social worker, so the individual differences affect the sociocultural influences on decisions. And then the group minority context and estimation of benefit and harm and assessment interventions. As research has shown that clients and clinicians, they rarely have accurate expectations of benefits and harms. And so regardless of a treatment, testing, or screening, that they tend to overestimate the benefits and underestimate the harms. And then session 12, we discuss more about the client communities and the organizational influences and dilemmas on decisions. And session 13, the social work applications, or furthermore into the social work applications and the implications. And again, I kind of more of the kind of statistical methods and analysis related to computational modeling and a deep neural network in terms of understanding how these biases are often captured and misunderstood, and how to kind of make more intentional efforts to make better decisions. And session 14 is kind of a wrap of the entire course, as well as a discussion on kind of the behavioral ethics that kind of gets integrated throughout So that's that. And then a course format. So basic concepts of the course serve as the core knowledge. And it consists of lecture followed by a discussion of assigned readings and supplemental readings. And in order to assist students, we to develop skills, we apply kind of course material, relevant videos, literature and case venues to use. And so the assignment breakdown, we will have like 5 process recordings, a midterm exam, a final exam, and a case study paper. So this is kind of the session 8, kind of the in-between of our 15-week course.
Which is going to explain prospect theory. This is the most influential theoretical framework in all social sciences, and has popularized the concept of loss aversion, which says that people prefer small guaranteed outcomes over larger risky outcomes. This covers risk aversion and risk seeking, our inaccurate weighting of probabilities, and sunk cost fallacy. Yeah.
Oh, and I just wanted to add to that CPT, it is a quantifiable psychological process of subjective values, opinions, and losses, as Ariel mentioned, and the probabilities. And so in social work, kind of practical applications of CPT, this model, kind of the parameters are usually estimated using more of a single kind of individual kind of maximum likelihood approach.
So that would be session 8. We can go to that next activity. So we'll review the left system 1 and system 2 and how they're used, and how they can be influenced and how we can influence our decisions as best we can. There'll probably be some crossover actually from Wharton a little bit in terms of business literature and psychology literature. Next slide. This is more reviewing left and right, system 1, system 2, and how if you're going to work on one, you could work on the other. So in terms of biases and micro expressions and subconscious bias, that becoming aware of that and how quickly our mind is activated and strives to make decisions will ultimately change system 2. But you can't, it's very hard to change one without the other. Okay. We'll do an experimental learning activity. So maybe small groups and asking everyone what is the last conscious decision you believe you made, and kind of going into that and asking how much do you think that was system 1, system 2, and then it'll be pre and post, and seeing what the effect of before the course versus after the course. And these are the readings, which are some articles, of course, his famous book, Thinking Fast and Slow, and some supplemental readings. And questions to consider. How do you influence minds and shape behaviors? How do you help clients and communities as well as your behaviors? How can we make better decisions and help clients make better decisions? How do we make decisions around the benefits and harm of clinical interventions when we're uncertain of any possible outcome? Can we say that people have true preferences, or do most choices in fact show revealed preferences that depend on the context of the decision? Our ability to remember past experiences when deciding, and even the way the various options are presented to us. Isn't it strange that the majority of all our behaviors and communications aims at influencing other people? Yet, at the same time, we have no clue about the underlying psychology that govern influence, but so many marketing companies do. Why do seemingly ethically and morally oriented social workers engage in unethical behaviors? For social workers, the fundamental question must be addressed if we wish to reduce the number of preventable ethical lapses in the practice of social work and social work professions. The answer is rooted in science. Extensive research has revealed how our brains process information and how strikingly unaware people are of their neural mechanisms of the subconscious influencing judgments, biases, and decisions. Our brains are pre-wired to conspire against us when we try to do the right thing. Failure to understand and appreciate just how insidious this phenomenon really is leaves us unequipped to recognize and avoid many of the most common ethical mistakes that happen during times of risk and uncertainty. Learning the NASW Code of Ethics and having good intentions is not enough. Listening carefully to what your brain is really telling you may be equally necessary to steer clear of ethical pitfalls. And that is our course we developed. Any questions?
Thank you, Ariel and Christina. Very interesting. Can you leave that slide up for just a quick second?
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna start with a question. And actually, our question has to do with the last sentence in this presentation. How can one listen carefully to what their brain is really telling them? How can we take what you just laid out to figure out what our brain is really telling us that might be necessary, as you said, to equally necessarily to steer clear of ethical pitfalls?
So I think something
You can take down the slide. You can take it down. But that really just like
okay. I think a lot
of my questions.
No, it's okay. I think a lot of social work education doesn't talk about decision making, but also doesn't talk about cognitive dissonance, which is the most uncomfortable emotion a human being can experience. You're literally experiencing being cut in half. And I think that heuristically, system one, we steer clear of that. When we feel that, we feel like something's wrong and I gotta like get out and not focus on this. But this actually helps us realize that cognitive dissonance, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong. It means it's unfamiliar, and being able to hold that frustration tolerance of this isn't comfortable, but it doesn't mean I have to fleet it, actually gives us a lot of room to grow. And understanding that that is a neural network activity, something that is occurring, is huge because it will push people to lean into discomfort. Mm-hmm. Rather than steer clear of it. Mm-hmm. Also with client work, things can come up and it's important to lean into that. Not, heuristics does protect us, but it is a shortcut. We're going to miss things. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's leaning into the system to the process, making space for it.
And in addition to that, I think with our course, what kind of further kind of delves into that is our integration of computational modeling, since that describes kind of more of the process of kind of the structure and kind of the neural kind of security in terms of behavior, and seeing that that it's a complex system, as well as humans or individuals are living in a complex system and based on a mathematical model. And so the goal of computational modeling is to kind of describe and to also understand the various systems and the interactions that we have with the environment. And so for being able to quantify and to, kind of measure it more so.
Very interesting. So I'm also, first of all, interested in why you are interested in this area, and how you see this as being connected to certain curricular areas in a MSW or DSW program in terms of practice for emerging social work professionals.
I've always been interested in original minds and people who take risk. So I started to read about Peter Thiel, actually, who actually came across this book and mentioned it many times. He's very risk averse. And when I read this, I realized, wow, really what happens is people capitalize on being risky, but how does someone really lean into that? And then it led me to realize, wow, how many people are taking risks in terms of treatment modalities, in terms of advancing and wanting to, because that is a risky thing to do, to break from the norm. So I was just very, very interested in how our brains worked with that. Why are some so risk averse and successful while some, they cannot be risk averse? And I don't know, it just really fascinated me. And I was really blown away by his work. I mean, being able to overlap psychology with economics like that it's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. And I'd say that similarly that, I am also interested in kind of Bayesian decision theory, which is associated with kind of probability theory, and in that, seeing kind of probabilities as possible outcomes and being able to kind of apply kind of more that mathematical modeling, because being able to kind of integrate more of that scientific approach to kind of further support and more of the rationale of what the reasons why we say select certain interventions for clients, or that we give a certain diagnoses and such, that that and and seeing kind of furthermore, like, where does that stem from, kind of delving for more, because I think in terms of social work practice, when we often talk about kind of decision making and biases and such, that like we understand that where it comes from the kind of the biopsychosocial, but like how exactly, and how can we actually capture that, and in ways that, again, that can be used to kind of predict kind of better kind of probabilities and make better decisions.
Very interesting. Thank you for that. So I'll open it up to your fellow classmates to see what questions they might have or comments. Any thoughts from the group? Questions?
I have a question. So I think that I'm really glad that you talk about ethics so much. And I know that a big part of an MSW program, especially in your first semester, is talking about power dynamics. And so I'm curious, how explicitly you all will have folks inquire the role of the social worker and the power dynamics at play with decision making.
I think there'll be a huge focus on that. I mean, I think decision making, the strength of your decision making is going to be influenced by your environment, and having a sensitivity to that is extremely important. And it's really easy for us to have a perception that we all think is right and rational, but another person is going to think theirs is right and rational. And understanding how their environment is influencing that is vital. It's extremely important. I don't know if that answered your question, Rob.
I'd say kind of also knowing kind of the different types of heuristics that are involved in our decision making, that being able to be more kind of reflective. And so in our course, we have students do 5 process recordings, and also kind of integrate kind of material learned from the course to identify kind of what types of like heuristics are kind of these different biases that are kind of stemming from or coming from, and how it's influencing kind of their dynamic with the client or the communities that they serve.
Interesting. So is your goal to help in taking a course like this, is to help students to be able to be more reflective in their decision-making process?
To be more reflective of cognitive biases, and how that affects clinical treatment, societal treatment on a macro and micro level, and also to expand one's own thinking about their own discomfort. Yeah.
And also, I feel like this course also elevates the social work kind of profession because we're introducing, again, that kind of computational modeling piece as well as integrating economic theories and of course like neuroscience and psychology. And so all of that combined and seeing kind of the research out there on how it affects not only clients and communities, but also clinicians. I think that's something that
yeah, and psychology, it's a micro perspective, but social work is a macro perspective, it's a systems perspective. So it's quite surprising that this actually hasn't been done yet in terms of a system looking at the economy or looking at how the economy affects the system, because it went from micro to macro, not macro to macro, but two lenses overlapping.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So I'm also impressed that the two of you came together with similar, interest in a similar topic, but I can tell that both of you have some distinct interests and some overlapping interests. So could you foresee really co-teaching a class like this?
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
We both love stats and math and graphs.
So would you see this more as a practice class or a theory class or some other type of class in the curriculum?
I feel like it would be almost a bridge of, we say kind of research to practice or theory to practice, but really it's like the research, theory, and practice all combined.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Kind of how you like have a qual and quan. I mean, and this would be kind of an extension of that.
Very interesting. Very innovative. Very innovative. So let's just see. I see it as 9. Let's see if there's any other questions. But thank you for your creativity and putting forth a very novel idea. I think it's just brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And you might be onto something that, no one has thought about, but see a great need for moving forward in the future. And there's very few classes that take that leap of bridging both the research aspects that you're talking about with practice. So I think it's a whole area of growth and development for the profession. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, Dr. Jeanette, his research actually was developed with someone named Dr. DSW. They worked together for over 10 years. He unfortunately died, and he says, I would have never done this on my own. This was a dual effort, and if there was a way for him to win the Nobel Prize despite being deceased, he would be here. Mm-hmm. But that's also really inspiring. Yeah.
Quite inspiring. Well, thank you both again. Very innovative. All of you have been just spectacular with the topics that you presented, the creativity you brought to your subject matter, and also your thinking through the very important logical pieces that are needed for a course, as well as the content and considering the process. So I think all of you really demonstrated how you pulled a lot of the things that we've learned from this class for your capstone, and I hope that it will be valuable for you moving forward. Not only if you decide to pursue teaching as an area of practice, but hopefully kind of thinking through the various components that inform social work education and practice will also inform some other areas of your work and scholarship as well. So I say, farewell, at least within the context of this class. And I wish all of you the best. I'm just going to do a quick poll and ask this question in the beginning. And you could do by a raise of hands. How many of you, after teaching this class, feel somewhat confident that you might be able to teach a class in the future? And you can use the reaction button just to see if you think you might be able to do it at some point in the future. Okay, that's good. I think that's a great outcome. Wonderful. And I hope you consider it seriously, because I think you think you will all do well. So any parting words, any final words before we leave?
I do.
Okay.
It's not really class related, but I have a new addition to my family.
Congratulations.
Oh, thanks for Piper.
Cute.
Yeah.
She's
So I had to
adorable.
miss out on class last Thursday because of water breaking and all that good
Oh my god.
What's the
Aw.
name?
Eliana.
Eliana. Oh my
Congratulations.
Congratulations. A new addition to the cohort.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the class.
teacher.
Class. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So she'll be listening on lectures too.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Oh, wonderful. Any other announcements or checkout words or one word checkout before we leave? See how you're doing. How you feeling about the class? Anything?
Thank you so much. It's been really great. I've really enjoyed this class.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Yes, thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Glad
And
to hear that.
thank you for offering to be a resource to us as we continue as well.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely. Absolutely. Anytime.
And for all the insider tips from your years of experience.
Quite welcome. Quite welcome. I enjoyed having all of you in the class, and thank you also for helping me co-create it and to be on this journey at this part of your professional development together. So I wish all of you well, and please feel free to reach out at any point. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, take care.
Thank you. Good night.
You're welcome.
I want to say thank you. You've been amazing. I learned so much. And I know sometimes I come across as a little bit of a know-it-all, and I'm trying to work on that.
Oh, no, you don't. No, you don't. Not in this class. I appreciate all your contributions. You've been amazing. And I hope, things are going well, with your partner. Been thinking about you in this class and all that you're juggling. And I know for many of the learners in this class, they have a lot of things they're juggling simultaneously. So I appreciate you, your dedication and your commitment to this process with all that you're dealing with. So
well, this is like the most relevant class I'm going to take in this program. So I had to, put everything into it that I could. And I know it's a pass-fail course, and I'm not asking for a grade, but I would love feedback on my paper just because I want to know how I can refine and learn and grow too. I'm sure there's areas I could do better. So any of that, I'm really happy to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I plan to do that. I read all papers very carefully and also feedback where I can. Even though it's a pass-fail class, I take it very seriously too, and I saw that all of you did as well. So I will definitely be, reviewing your papers individually, carefully, and giving you feedback. And always feel free to reach out at any point, and seriously,
Well, thank you.
in your career.